All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION after this hour. The Israeli army has released a video showing strikes on what the state of Israel claims are Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, as fears of an all-out war continue to grow. And the American aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln has now entered into West Asian waters as tensions remain high over a potential reprisal from Iran. This is the American President Joe Biden is pushing for the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Now, Biden has also updated Netanyahu on the American efforts to support Israel's defense against threats from Iran and also its proxy groups. Now, the White House has said that the American president has stressed on the urgency to reach a deal during the call. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris also took part in the call that came just hours after the American Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrapped up his 9th tour to West Asia since this war began. And this is a video that the state of Israel has released showing what it claims are airstrikes in Lebanon. The Israeli army claims that it is targeting Hezbollah's military infrastructure in response to a rocket attack. Now, these bombings have come after Hezbollah said that it had fired some pretty crude Katyusha rockets at an Israeli military logistical site in the occupied Golan Heights. It also fired a swarm of drones on military posts in northern Israel, about 22 kilometers from the Lebanese border, in retaliation to earlier Israeli airstrikes in the Bekaa Valley. Now, the American Central Command has said that a second U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, has of course arrived in West Asia. These are American military assets that are being put in place for the defense of a foreign nation, Israel, which is America's very close ally. Now, the aircraft carrier is equipped with the latest F-35 fighter jets added to the U.S. ships that are already present in the region, including another aircraft carrier, that is USS Theodore Roosevelt, which of course arrived in mid-July. On the diplomatic front, the negotiators are of course heading back to Cairo this week to try and iron out details of a deal. The current proposal put together by US, Egypt and Qatar over several weeks in July is said to be the strongest form of a potential deal so far. Now, Israel is reportedly now on board, but Hamas has said in public statements that this deal that is now being presented by the Americans and other negotiators is different from what was earlier shown to them. Now, Netanyahu, who visited an Air Force base in northern Israel, said that Israel is of course prepared for any scenario, both in defense and also if it has to carry out in offense.
I am here at the Air Force Base to closely monitor our preparations against threats both near and far. We are prepared for any scenario, both in defense and attack.
The Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant in fact travelled to the Gaza Strip to assess a military operation that resulted in what he says is a defeat of the Rafah Brigade and the destruction of as many as about 150 Hamas tunnels. Meanwhile, people in Gaza are on the run again. They have fled the western area of Khan Yunis after the Israelis dropped leaflets that this area will be bombed imminently.
Death is more merciful in this country. We were displaced 20 times. I swear to God our houses and tents were struck. They do not want us to live. Oh God, they even do not want us to enjoy our life.
The Gaza's Civil Emergency Service claimed that the Israeli military in fact struck a school and also a nearby house in the Gaza city on Wednesday, killing at least about 3 people and wounding 15 other Palestinians. The Palestinian health officials have said that the Israeli airstrikes across Gaza have killed more than 50 Palestinian civilians in just the last 24 hours. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening in this war and why is it, despite the best efforts, a ceasefire deal has not been arrived at. And to share more insights on this, we're being joined by Mr. Elijah J. McNear, who's a veteran war correspondent. He's joining us live from Paris. Now, Mr. McNear, we've been talking about the war that has been unfolding in the Gaza Strip. The Americans are, of course, negotiating. Antony Blinken has just wrapped up his 9th tour to West Asia. And despite the best efforts from the negotiators, a ceasefire deal has not been reached. What do you think is the reason for it? And does Hamas have any reservations on this deal that has now been put forth on the table?
The Israeli media today and yesterday, in the last 48 hours, has been extremely critical of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he insists on keeping the troops in the Philadelphia corridor that separate Egypt from Gaza. That is one of the main conditions that the Prime Minister Netanyahu is imposing in the negotiation, in addition of other conditions that he came up with, and that has triggered the reaction of the Mossad chief, David Berner, and the Shabak and the head of the negotiator leaders who are participating to the negotiation in Doha, where they express their dissatisfaction of always the Prime Minister bringing the new condition to the table. Hamas said it has agreed on President Joe Biden, and the United Nations deal that was proposed in April and May, and they are ready to start the negotiation. Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying that he wants to control all the Palestinians who are traveling from the south back to their homes in the north, or whatever remains of the home. And also he wants to limit the supply through Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing to the control of the Israeli army, which already has been done, but he doesn't want to pull out the forces. And he wants also to keep the forces between the north and the south in a corridor that is called the Humanitarian corridor. And lastly, he wants the control of all the names of the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners, that will be exchanged with the Israeli prisoners. And this is something that Hamas refused.
Absolutely, indeed. So long as Israel insists on keeping its soldiers in the Gaza Strip, that, of course, is going to be a key sticking point in the negotiations. Now, talk to us a bit about the American involvement in these negotiations, where the Americans, on the one hand, have been taking part in these negotiations. On the other, they also sanctioned $20 billion of weapons to the state of Israel. And even though Israel is taking part in these negotiations, it has continued with its campaign of relentlessly bombing the Gaza Strip. And what we've witnessed in its northern border with the state of Lebanon is that the tensions there are going up as well. Do you expect the Israel-Lebanon conflict could actually spiral out of control before there could be an Iranian reprisal?
You have raised many important points. First of all, the Americans, yes, indeed, they are still supplying the Israelis with ammunition and money. They're not only $3.5 billion that President Barack Obama established every year, and then after him, Joe Biden, but also there are additional $26 billion and also the additional supply to the interception missiles to refill the Israeli system. And we've seen the Americans saying that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed on the negotiation, and now it's up to Hamas, when the Israelis know very well, apart from the Prime Minister, that there are many details that Prime Minister Netanyahu refused. But what is alarming, what you have raised indeed, is the Israelis are saying that they are moving more troops to the borders with Lebanon. And this front is increasing in tension. There is an exchange of rockets and missiles, and there is a clear indication that the Americans are sending Qatari envoy to Iran to warn the Iranians that all their allies may face a bigger war from Israel. It doesn't mean that an invasion of troops on the ground, but it means bombardment similar to the one of Gaza.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Elijah Magnier, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.